I think that depression was a blessing for me because I had a benchmark to say, am I going to hold on to this way of being and let this be my reality on a continuous basis? Or am I willing to let go and try something new? So that was what allowed me to be curious into stepping into ease. So firstborn daughters typically are the good girl, right? It's like we're trying to live into our parents' expectations of us. And then we carry that into the world. I want to be perceived as hardworking, successful, loving, all of the things. So not working is going to affect how people view me. People are going to view me as lazy. So it's there's one level of I don't want to be lazy, but I think it's more driven by what are people going to say about me if I don't work.
What's up, ladies? Welcome to the health class She Deserves, the show where we ditch outdated women's health myths and talk real bodies, real cycles, and real stories. I'm your host, Autumn Payon, and today we are talking to Adaku Mbagwu. She is not just a coach, she is a movement. A Nigerian-born, Tulum-based transformational guide, Adaku built a 7-figure recruitment business, battled depression, survived a suicide attempt, and emerged on the other side through deep inner healing. As the eldest daughter of 7 children, she spent much of her life over-functioning, over-delivering, and feeling unseen until she broke the cycle. Today, she is the founder of Healed Hero, a global community for high-performing firstborn daughters who are ready to stop carrying everyone else and start living for themselves. With a fierce commitment to disrupting generational pressure and perfectionism, Adaku helps 6- and 7-figure women reprogram old patterns, reclaim their power, and lead with ease, without losing their ambition. Her work lives at the intersection of mindset, healing, leadership, and legacy. Known as the First Daughter Coach, Adaku is on a mission to help the women the world leans on feel what it's like to be held, seen, and at peace. Adaku, welcome to class.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here. And I'd love to start just when I was prepping this interview, I learned that the first 3 letters of your name actually mean eldest daughter. Is that true?
Yes, every firstborn daughter in the Nigerian Igbo tribe has a name starting with Ada.
Wow. And so obviously being a firstborn daughter is like a huge part of your identity, but how did that actually just shape you from day one?
Yeah, I think they in our culture they call the firstborn daughter the second mum. So before I was even pushed out the chute, I had responsibilities or expectations that came with being the first girl born into the family. And I think that it shaped me in the sense of giving me a sense of responsibility for others first. And I think it allowed me to develop really positive attributes in terms of being responsible, being high achieving, being mindful of others around me, being sensitive to what people need. All of those things kind of came from the role that I played.
Absolutely. And I love how you touch on that because that's very relatable for me. And I was going to ask you, like, we often hear about, I guess, the more like negatives of the oldest daughter syndrome and how like burnt out we end up getting. But you've experienced both that shadow side and like the really beautiful, empowering side. Can you walk us through that transformation?
Uh, sure. I think anyone that has a firstborn daughter in their life is lucky to have them. As you said, we're very generous. We know how to show up. We're very trustworthy. We're loyal, all of those things. So there are good traits that come from it. I think where it starts to lose its benefit is when we forget ourselves in the process. And that definitely happened with me in my experience. I felt so much pressure to lead by example for my siblings. We grew up in an underprivileged community and there weren't really many positive role models. So I felt like I had to not only break out of the typical mold of kind of getting a council flat, getting pregnant early, all of those things, which I don't judge, and there's nothing wrong with people that take that path. But I wanted something different for myself and my siblings. So the pressure of that really weighed on me as a young woman. It wasn't just about me trying to figure out who am I and what I wanted to do. It was this whole family unit that I was thinking, well, I need to help provide for the family. I need to make sure that I'm a role model for my siblings. I need to be on top of them in terms of parenting them to make sure that they're not running astray. And all of that kind of catches up on one. So when I was in university, I was working 40 hours a week to send money home to my mum to help with my siblings. And so I just didn't really have a childhood. I've been working as long as I've known. I've been thinking about raising my siblings as long as I know. And then in my mid 20s, it all kind of caught up with me. And I fell into a depression and had a failed suicide attempt. And it was caught me by surprise because I didn't think I was a candidate for depression. I thought it was for people who were weak, and I viewed myself as strong. It shows how naive and ignorant I was to what depression was. And but it was the best wake up call that I had because I thought that I had all the answers. I was taking care of everyone. Everyone came to me for everything. So I I knew what I was doing, and depression helped me see that maybe what I thought I knew wasn't right, and I needed to throw my hands up and figure out another way, which I did.
Yeah, and it's like you said, like, I think a lot of us are so, like, on go, go, go all the time. We're so burnt out, we don't even realize it, and you don't think of yourself as a candidate for depression, and we have all these misconceptions around it, like, it's a sign of weakness, and like you said, but I love how you view that now as, like, how it was a huge wake-up call for your life, and I really admire how vulnerable you are about that kind of, like, hitting rock bottom. Were there like any internal signs, I guess, that you in hindsight realized like you were really ignoring? Because you said it surprised you.
Yeah, I think I was so used to being stressed that I thought that stress was the norm, which is why it surprised me. But there were definitely signs of stress. So there was a lot of frustration and resentment. So it got to the point where I was arguing with my mum on a daily basis, trying to kind of tell her that she needs to shift how she was living her life and she needed to listen to me. And I was also wanting her to apologize for me not having my childhood. So there was a lot of tension all the time, which is not a good sign, which meant I wasn't happy in myself. The other thing that started to happen close to the breakdown was that I just couldn't sleep. I was suffering from insomnia, and that then creates this chain. I'm not sleeping and I'm stressed. So the lack of sleep makes me more stressed, which then makes me not sleep. And it was just this ongoing cycle to the point where I would show up at work and I would just start crying for no reason. And I'd have to run to the bathroom and like, what is wrong with me? And I couldn't control it. And I tried to go back and I kept doing that. It was actually the CEO of the company that I was working at the time that diagnosed me as depressed because he picked up on like something's wrong, no matter how much I tried to hide it. So those I would say were the signs: the lack of sleep, the irritability, the resentment and anger that I was walking around with were all letting me know like you need to do something different. And I just ignored it and kept pushing through as I always did, and until I couldn't anymore.
Mhm. And I think that's super relatable, especially for eldest daughters. You're never taught to slow down and tune in for a second and check in and just be like, how am I actually doing? I want to dive deeper into something you mentioned about not really having a childhood. You talk a lot about parentification in childhood. Can you just unpack what that word means to start?
Sure. Parentification is when you're given adult responsibilities way before your time. So I was born in London, in Nigeria, and left for London when I was 6 years old. And in Nigeria, we had a very abundant lifestyle and we had a lot of help. So we had my aunties living in the house and we had maids and cooks and drivers. And then my mum moved to London, and then all of a sudden she was a single parent with three children, one on the way. Drastic shift had a huge impact on us. She had qualifications to teach, but because they weren't gained in the UK, they didn't qualify for her to get a full-time teaching job. So she was able to supply teach, which meant that sometimes there was work, sometimes there wasn't. And when there wasn't work, she would supplement our lifestyle on credit cards, which eventually caught up with her. So from the age of 8, I was very cognizant of the fact that we don't have food in the house. The gas bill hasn't been paid. We haven't had gas for months. We haven't had electricity for months. We're doing our homework around candlelight. And there was something in me that felt like I had to do something to help. So I would ask for work around the neighborhood, and I would often get the opportunity to like babysit children sometimes that were older than me and get paid a little, like a £5 or £10 here and there. I would braid my siblings' hair, and when they would go out, their friends' parents would ask me to braid their friends' hair. So I was hustling and making money where either each way I could around that. Then my mum divorced my dad and remarried, and shortly after she remarried, her new husband became schizophrenic. So her attention went fully to him, which meant that I stepped even more into adult responsibility. So I was cooking, I was cleaning, I was doing homework with my siblings. And then once I finished doing all of that, I would do my own homework, braiding hair. So I pretty much was the parent in the house. I laugh and say that my siblings' parental trauma is towards me rather than my mom, and sometimes we've worked on our stuff, but when they had anger towards me and we were kind of addressing what happened in their childhood, and they were saying you were strict and you were judgmental and I was like, and I was 11, so it's like a little bit of perspective, but it didn't matter to them. So yeah, it's unfortunate that I had to sacrifice my childhood, but I felt like I have a choice.
Exactly. Like you were a child as well, and you're already going above and beyond, doing things that are technically parental jobs. For somebody listening who's maybe thinking like, oh, I'm kind of relating with this, but I always just thought, I have a strong work ethic. I'm the responsible one. Where do you draw that line, I guess, between parentification and just being a helpful child?
I think it's when the child feels like there's something imbalanced in there. If the child is feeling, I don't know, I've observed some parent firstborn daughter dynamics, and there comes a point where the little girl loses the life in her. You could tell that she's kind of carrying the weight of the world. And then I am kind of like I can relate. I know when that's happened, where it's like they don't feel like lighthearted and they just have children things to worry about. They're kind of carrying either the emotional baggage of the parent or they're doing things that they don't feel is fair to do. Uh, but I think yeah, it's difficult because depending on the situation, my mum said to me after I came out of my depression and suicide attempt that she apologized and she said, I saw you as my husband and I needed help. And I was scared that if I mothered you, you would stop helping me. So I can't imagine how hard things were for her to deal with a schizophrenic husband and being in a new country without her ecosystem. And for her, it was like, well, this little girl is stepping up to the plate, so I'm going to take advantage of that help and support, and I'm going to lean on it. So it's challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. The fact that she had the awareness, at least in hindsight, to recognize that is probably healing in itself, just to hear those words. Yes, this is how I felt, and it wasn't okay. I'm curious because you obviously work with women, working them heal this aspect of themselves. How do you see this dynamic showing up in romantic relationships as an adult?
Ooh, okay, yes. So it shows up a lot. I work with a lot of married women, and they typically in general, it shows up in their work, it shows up in their marriage. They don't know how to communicate their needs. And then their needs go unmet, and then they're frustrated that their needs are not being met. And it's like, you kind of got to help people out to let them know that because they've been givers and givers and givers, they haven't been trained to receive. So it feels like a big ask. And also, I think a superpower of firstborn daughters is that because they've been so conditioned to focus externally, they can pick up on the little nuances. They're hyper vigilant. They can see, okay, this person needs this, and they can just kind of act on that. So they expect the world to respond to them in the same way. And everyone doesn't have that superpower. So they don't know. So I think that's a key one. They feel typically in relationships that they are given more, and it's not about their partner, it's about their habit and their pattern of giving more and giving too much or over giving. So it's about them kind of tuning into, have I checked in with my time, my capacity, my well-being, on whether I can do this? Am I communicating what I need in return? Am I asking for help when I need it? When help is being offered, am I allowing myself to receive it? Because again, it's like if you're not used to receiving, you think it needs to be a transaction. It's like a lot of firstborn daughters are in a default position of earning love. So when they get something, they feel like they need to do it one back rather than just being grateful and receiving it. So there's a bunch of patterns that need to be broken in terms of relating to spouses, partners, but also it shows up in other areas of their lives.
Yeah, that's like that's so relatable. The way that you phrase that is something that like over the past few years I've become hyper aware of in my own life of like I like you were saying like a superpower. Like I can read minds sometimes. And if I really love someone and I'm spending a lot of time with them, I'm amazing pattern recognition. Like I can pick up on those things and I feel as if I can anticipate the thoughts and the feelings of the people that I'm in relationships with, but they don't have that same ability, and you just kind of expect them to if like we're saying, if you were parentified at a young age and you're healing these wounds, it's something that is very difficult to stop doing, I guess, in a romantic relationship. But I think you phrase that so perfectly. I think that's relatable to a lot of women. And part of your process working with clients is overcoming these limiting beliefs. And you mentioned a few like love is earned, like feeling like it needs to be transactional. What are some other like really common limiting beliefs that you see from women that you work with?
That no one can do anything as well as them, which is on some level true, but especially if you want to scale or you want a soft life, which is a trending word right now, you've got to learn to trust people and delegate and lean on people, which is difficult because a lot of first world daughters feel the need to be in control because it's like, I need things delivered in a certain way. But then that leads to over functioning because now you're doing everything. You're not only taking care of everything you need to do for yourself, you're constantly managing everything else for everyone around you. So being able to let go of control, being able to let go of perfectionism is really important. The other thing is hyper independence. So a lot of firstborn daughters, even though they might be surrounded by a whole bunch of people, usually feel alone because this whole receiving thing as well. It's like I know how to count on me and people have let me down in the past. And as long as I've got me, I'm good. But as humans, we're tribal, so we don't really work like that. So it can lead to feeling lonely. It can lead to feeling unseen. It could lead to feeling like they don't matter, that they can't see how they're perpetrating that dynamic or those results for themselves by staying on their island that is safe, that they have control over. And so those are the main characteristics that kind of come out and go against them. It's like they can be their gifts and curse. So on one hand, being a perfectionist means that you deliver really high quality work. On another hand, it means that you slow yourself down because you're overthinking things. You don't delegate because you don't trust other people to deliver to your to the standard that you want. And so it either each way can be a skill, but it can also limit. So it just depends on where you are in your life and what you don't have. Those attributes could be stopping you from moving towards what you want.
Yeah, and I think I love the way that you said that because I feel like there's a lot of adjectives that have negative connotations that are often assigned to firstborn daughters, like stubbornness and bossiness and control freak. But like you're saying, there is a really beneficial side to a lot of these in its like healthy expression. Like I'm not stubborn, I'm confident and I trust myself, but also that can lead too far in the other direction where it's like you're not collaborative. And like you said, we exist to be in connection with other people. Humans aren't designed to be in isolation. How do you distinguish, I guess, because I'm an overthinker and I will be like, am I being too much of a perfectionist right now? Or am I just having attention to detail and delivering high quality work? Like, how do you draw that line?
Are you stressed out? Are you finding that you're procrastinating and you're not moving things forward? So, as long as it's stopping you from moving towards something you want to move in, it's crossed the line of not serving you. If it's serving you and you feel like your life is fine and you're delivering to a high quality and you're happy, then have at it. So I think the barometer is whether it's holding you back or moving you forward, causing you stress or keeping you like making you happy.
Yeah, and I feel like it comes back to that, like, having the awareness to check in with yourself and recognize those warning signs like we were talking about in the beginning of the episode of, "I'm feeling real stressed and really burnt out, and this maybe isn't very healthy for me right now," or, "I'm slipping into unhealthy perfectionist patterns and just being able to check in and learn those things. And I feel like that's something that takes time. I feel like for me, it was very difficult at first when I started paying attention to these things of like, I can't figure out where the line is. And I have such a high baseline of stress and anxiety that it's like, I don't know what peace really feels like anymore, and really reconnecting with that, refining that. How do you work with women to kind of to lead them to that, to lead them to finding more peace and teaching them, I guess, to really tune in and recognize those signals from their body?
So I don't try to interrupt or rush someone's process. I can observe someone and can see, okay, you're pretty high strung and you're stressed, and this is not healthy and this is not going to lead somewhere. But if they're feeling like everything is fine, absolutely, I've got nothing to say. You know, if it's working for you and it's not jeopardizing anything, then have at it. I think for me, so in my personal experience, if I hadn't have fallen into depression, no one could have told me anything was wrong. I needed to break down for me to say, okay, my hands are up. I'm open to something new. So a lot of the time when women come to me, there is something that's really painful. Either their business has been stagnant and they're working twice as hard and they're not seeing results. And that frustration is like, okay, clearly something's not working out. Or their well-being is falling apart and they're stressed and drinking or doing something. They're like, okay, I think those are the times when they always say, even in recovery, that sometimes people aren't ready to change until they hit a rock bottom. And I've definitely found that in my work. I think that we can get, so just like you said, you get so used to your norm, you have a high threshold of stress that when someone says, oh, you're too stressed out, you're like, what are you talking about? Don't project on me. You know, like
Mhm.
you need to get to that point where you feel like this isn't sustainable, this isn't working, I need help. And then you'll be receptive to working with me. And I can then help you and you can collaborate rather than resisting me. I have had some clients who have come to argue with me, and I'm like, I don't need to argue with you.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, you're just not ready yet. And I think you bring up a really good point is like, unfortunately, like there's only so much advice you can give, only so many things you can tell people. It's a lot of times the best way you're going to learn anything is like you said, by hitting that rock bottom. And I think it's really interesting that you said that part about somebody else being like, "Oh, you're stressed out." And you're like, "What are you talking about?" That was kind of the same. Like I never considered myself a very anxious person, which is actually like insane. If you know, knew me at all in childhood, I was so anxious, so high strung all the time. And it wasn't until my early 20s that I was starting to just kind of have like if something just kind of felt wrong mentally. And I was working from home and I just was feeling like such a dip in motivation and dopamine. And I was like, well, I feel like I should get some sort of like neuropsych evaluation, figure out what's going on here. And I was talking to my sister about it. And I said, well, I never really consider myself a very anxious person. And she looked at me incredulous and was like, what? You're like the most anxious person I know. And it was such like a moment for me where I was like, wait a second. I guess when I think about it logically, yes, it's so crazy when it's just all you've ever known. It, you just don't know any
You
better.
don't
You don't
see
know
it.
any
Yeah.
different. It's
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah. So,
Yeah. Which is, I guess it's the analogy of boiling a frog in water. I can't remember. Like
oh
it's
yeah, something like that.
the temperature is slowly changing. You don't even realize until it's like,
Yes.
oh, this is not working. And it's kind of
Hmm.
like, well, I've been doing the same thing. I haven't changed anything, but it's only sustainable for so long.
Exactly. I would love to ask you about how we can address the fear of slowing down. Because, at least for me personally, I know that it does not feel like it feels like I'm being irresponsible or lazy when I force myself to slow down. And then it's just like not even relaxing. And there's just this big fear around it of like, oh, I'm going to lose everything I've built, or I'm never going to achieve my goals if I take a step back. How do we work through that?
It's a interesting question. How do you work through that? So I had the same fear after depression because as I started working with a coach, I started realizing all of these pressures I had on myself, on who I should be and how I should be showing up in life. And I was really grasping tight because I'm like, my life is successful in comparison to a lot of people because I have these motivators that are pushing me. And again, this is why I think that depression was a blessing for me, because I had a benchmark to say, am I going to hold on to this way of being and let this be my reality on a continuous basis? Or am I willing to let go and try something new? So that was what allowed me to be curious into stepping into ease. It is difficult for a firstborn daughter to not go into, especially. So, firstborn daughters typically are the good girl, right? It's like
Mhm.
we're trying to live into our parents' expectations of us, and then we carry that into the world. I want to be perceived as hardworking, successful, loving, all of the things. So, not working is going to affect how people view me. People are going to view me as lazy. So it's there's one level of I don't want to be lazy, but I think it's more driven by what are people going to say about me if I don't work, and then that's the thing to overcome. So it's like so I've been able to leverage my time. I've been able to take 3 years off and like have been able to make enough money to travel and pay my bills only because I shifted the mindset. So you can still earn a lot and do less, but if you're attached to being seen to be busy, then you're going to continue to create overfunctioning and overwhelm, and because you wear a badge of honor towards it.
Mhm.
So I it's hard to say how to overcome feeling that way. You have to want to overcome feeling that way, and usually it's because you've broken down from being attached to
Mhm.
being busy, and it's not getting you the results, or the cost that you're paying for it is way higher than the results that you're getting usually.
Mhm. I think that you just called out so many people. You don't want to admit it because then you're admitting that it's like an ego thing. But that is such a common theme for my life, at least, where it's like I have to take such a serious step back and be like, do I want this, or do I want what people would think about me if I had this? A lot of times it's like, no, I don't actually want this. I just like the way it sounds. But I think that you had really, really good advice there with meeting it with curiosity of just like, well, what happens if? Let's just experiment, try it out. What happens if I slow down?
Yeah, that external validation's a drug, you know? It's
It is.
like yeah, I remember I had a mentor once, and every time I would go to him, there was something crazy going on in my life that I was in the middle of solving. And he said to me, your life is like a drama series. Every month I see you, there's something going on. And I was like, isn't everyone's life like that? And then that realization was like, what do I get from being in this telenovela where there's always something exploding? And I realized that people would always be like, oh my gosh, how are you doing that? That's so inspiring. Wow. And I was like, I think I might be addicted to being seen and as inspirational. And then as soon as I became aware of that, I was like, I don't want to create a life of chaos just so that I can be the strong one that fixes it all.
Mm.
And since then, I'm living in a beach island with a small community, with
Yeah.
doing kumbaya, spiritual community, so it is being able to kind of see what the payoff is a really good way for you to check yourself. Like, am I committed to having this and for the cost of like keeping this dynamic in my life? So
And yeah, I was going to say, like, high achieving eldest daughters are often praised. Like, I think we all have a little bit of a praise kink. We love to be told that we're hardworking and inspiring and responsible. I have been called more mature, like mature for my age since I was like 6 years old. And
yeah,
it literally is a drug. Like I would get high
yeah,
from it.
yeah.
So when you say that you brought the awareness to it, and then like once that piece kind of clicked for you, it seems like everything else kind of fell into place. Was there like a first step, I guess, that you took after that awareness came? Or was it just like you realized the awareness and you were like, no, this needs to be different?
I think the awareness was first, and then when situations will come up, I would say, "Is it my circus? Do I need to get involved? Do I?" I had a benchmark then to kind of observe myself in relation to what was happening around me, and seeing the urge to want to fix it, or the urge to jump in, or maybe even sometimes I would create and manipulate situations to give me like a more difficult outcome so that I can triumph and fix it. So I started seeing how sneaky my mind was at creating these circumstances that like I was feeding off. And it was exhausting. I was tired all the time. But yeah, as soon as I saw it, I just started monitoring everything and making different choices.
Yeah, that's that, like, sneaky self-sabotage that shows up, but I feel like it's like once it rains, it pours. Once you start to bring awareness to it, you realize these little things, all of a sudden, you're realizing all of these things that you're like, "I'm making my life harder for no reason, and I have control over that." But I think you kind of touch a little bit on, like, boundaries there, which is I feel like that's, like, a hot topic these days. People are always talking about boundaries and people are debating, what's too strict of a boundary and what's not. For someone listening who is relating with all of this, what's your advice for setting boundaries with yourself first? Because I think that's kind of what you just described there is like you had to set your boundaries within your own self. What's your advice for starting to do that?
Well, first you got to get clear on what you want, right? It depends on the person and what their intention is. So once you get clear on your intention, like I got clear, I don't want to have a dramatic life. I don't want to be putting out fires anymore. If that's my intention, then it becomes easier to know, is me saying yes to this going to pull me into drama? Is me saying no to this going to keep me out of drama? And if I'm committed to not being in drama, I have to say no. So you got to get clear on what you desire and want first, which sometimes may be difficult. So this is a hard one for first-born daughters to receive because we're so strong and we have leadership qualities, we don't see how much we fall into people pleasing. And sometimes we will abandon our needs because our parents have an expectation or we want to seem like the good person and get that addictive hit of the praise. And all of a sudden, all of our boundaries or desires or intentions kind of go to the wayside. So it's about getting clear on what you want and then being really uncompromising with it. And then when you come to setting boundaries, a lot of firstborn daughters try to set boundaries by gaining understanding from the other person. So it's not really boundary setting, it's almost like a negotiation. It's like, I'm going to set this boundary. You understand why I have to do this, right? And that's not setting boundaries because then if they say no, then you're now in a negotiation and then you're compromising. And no, it's like if you get clear on who you are, what you want, and you're like, okay, this doesn't work for me, you can say with love, hey, I would love to do that for you, but I don't have the capacity. So I'm going to have to say no. Done. There's no conversation. There's no need for agreement. There's no trying to convince them. You're not checking in to understand. And then that builds an internal sense of self. It's like, oh, like adult me stuck up for little me that had to do everything I was told to do. So then you start to break that pattern of kind of being subservient to everyone's beck and call.
Yeah, it's not a negotiation when you're setting boundaries, but that need to be understood and to make sure that people aren't mad at you. Like, I think that's very relatable for a lot of people. I'm sure this comes up a lot. How do you work through the guilt that kind of comes along with that? Because I think that is the like block, I guess, for a lot of eldest daughters is that like, well, I feel really guilty. I feel like I'm disappointing people.
Yeah. So for me, again, it's case by case,
Mhm.
but generally the guilt is usually a byproduct of not sacrificing yourself. So again, it's kind of like looking from a different perspective. I love people around me and I do feel good when I give to people when my tank is full. When I give to people when my tank is empty, I feel resentful. I feel like they should be given back. I feel so then I'm not really giving unconditionally. So even though I want to say yes and I'm saying no because I can't, then I'm setting myself up to be able to pour more into them because I'm going to be restored, refreshed, rested, all of the things, which gives me the capacity to show up a lot more stronger rather than showing up for them halfway, letting my stuff kind of fall in terms of quality, all of those negotiations. So it's difficult, but it's choosing yourself. I guess it's the whole putting the oxygen mask on you first so that
Yes.
you're alive so that you can save the others. It's letting that override this need to be loved because that's what you're bargaining against. It's like, oh my gosh, I feel guilty. They might not love me. They might cut me off. And the people in your life who love you will stay. They might rebel in the transition if you've always done showing up a certain way for them. And when you start saying no, they're not going to like it. But if you just keep showing up and consistent and saying no when you can't and yes when you can, you'll reprogram them to be like, oh, okay, she does say yes. So next time she says no, I know that she really can't. So, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, it's exactly as you say. If you are trying to give from an empty tank, it's just everyone's gonna, no one's really gonna come out on top of that situation, and especially not you. But when you allow yourself to fill your tank first and to meet your own needs first, and then give from that place, it's a much more like unconditional way of giving and loving, like you said. I would love to circle back a little bit to your relationship with your mother. And like you said, you had a lot of anger with her, but you mentioned a conversation and an apology that you did get from her. Do you have any advice for an eldest daughter listening who is maybe harboring like a lot of anger?
Yeah, so I want to preface first that I only got an apology from my mum when I didn't need it. When I wanted it, she didn't give me one. So it came, I went through a lot of like healing and working with coaches and doing programs. And then I got a breakthrough that I didn't really look at my mum's journey. Kind of as her child, I just had this baseline expectation that a good mum equals X and you were failing. And when I took a step back and I was like, oh, she's a human. She's also a firstborn daughter. She like went to university at 14 in India and lived with an uncle who sexually assaulted her, and then she had to move out and still stay in India to go to like I can't imagine as a teenager going through that in a new country without your family, having to stay in university. And then as soon as she got back to Nigeria, she got married to my dad, and her siblings moved in with her, and she had to care for them and put them through education. And then my dad's businesses started getting impacted, and then she got shipped to the UK by herself with 3 children. And once I started observing her journey, I had a little bit more empathy and was like, wow, I haven't seen her. And that's when I called her and I said, you know, mum, like I've been so angry with you for the role that I've had to play, but I just want to acknowledge that I haven't seen you. And then I kind of started riffing off everything I've just been saying. She's cried for the first time in my life. And I was like, oh, wow, she also hasn't felt seen and she's also had to carry all of this. And I was like, you know what? I forgive you because there are things about me that I love about me that I wouldn't have had it not been for the role that I played. So I am grateful for having that role because of who I am. And she just said thank you at the time. And it was 2 weeks after that she said, you know, I want to let you know that I'm sorry. So sometimes when we really want something, the reason it's difficult for our parents to give us the apology is because they have to admit failure in parenting. And humans don't, we struggle to, we don't want to be bad people because we're tribal. We're like, oh my gosh, if I say that this is who I am, I'm going to be eradicated and I'm going to die. That's what's happening on a primal basis on in our brains. So it's really difficult for people to kind of own their stuff and apologize. So I would say to the person that's really in pain and struggling to reflect on the things that they have learned from the role that they have played, the way that it's added value to their lives, the things that are not working, that's in their power to transform and change, and try to make it less about your mom or your dad and make it more about you and who you become and how you can love the attributes that you've gained from it. And that's what gave me a lot of ease. And a lot of the clients that I work with, I've had clients who that have been no contact for 10 years and reestablished contact, a client whose father molested her and she also reestablished contact, but they weren't able to do that until they got complete within themselves about what happened and where they are now and coming into acceptance and love with it, which then allow them to not expect anything from the other person, which then creates a blank canvas for them to rebuild a new relationship.
Yeah, that you bring up really important points there, because I think it is really easy for us to view our parents as like not human, because
Mm.
they're your model from such an early age that it's almost you, yeah, you just you forget that they're human, that they've had an entire life before you came along. and they
Mhm.
continued to have life and to deal with difficult things after you came along. And you're really breaking the cycle there with this work that you do and the way that you have healed. It's like you said, your mom was also an oldest daughter, had a lot of similar things imprinted upon her. And by doing this healing and really bringing awareness to it and mending these relationships, it's a huge break in the cycle, which I think is really beautiful. Do you have, like, if you went back to your younger self today that was in that situation being parentified, what would you tell that young girl about the woman and the business that you've built today?
I will tell her that there is really light at the end of the tunnel. The life that I have, I would not have been able to fathom as the young girl that was going without food and with my schizophrenic stepdad and the whole neighborhood kind of looking at us as a laughing stock. I wasn't supposed to end up where I ended up. So I would kind of encourage her that like all of the dreams that she had are gonna be fulfilled and then some. I think that there was one point where I was just like, I just want a cupboard full of food. And I always have a cupboard full of food. So yeah, I would let her know that there are better days ahead. And I would probably advise her that I think a lot of eldest daughters, and I did, took on a lot of responsibilities that I thought were implied, but no one actually asked me explicitly to do anything. I just kind of stepped into that role. So I would tell her, like, you don't have to do everything. You know, it's like you can choose the things that you want to do, and you can also go and have a childhood. Because, yeah, I was a serious little girl who was always contemplating the state of the family, and it's like I could have gone out and played and no one would have stopped me. My mom would have let me do that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. It's like you just kind of you take on the role so much, it becomes such a part of your identity. It just seems it's like a second nature. Thank you so much for being here. I have one last question I like to ask all of my guests at the
Sure.
end. Since we are in health class here, and you can really take this in any direction that you would like, but if you could rewrite the health class curriculum that every woman deserves, or we could say every eldest daughter deserves, what would your first lesson be?
Think that I would teach myself and other young ladies about emotional health. I feel like I'm still at the early stages of learning how to access my emotions, be with my emotions. I kind of feel like a lot of firstborn daughters shove it down and keep moving. And when it comes to health, a lot of health ailments that people suffer are a byproduct of some of the emotional unresolved issues that they're carrying. And if we get taught how to use our emotions as tools to let us know when we're in and out of alignment of who we're supposed to be, or let us know when our tank is getting empty and how to replenish that and how to make sure we take care of our emotional health. I think that a lot of mental health and physical health issues down the line will could be avoided.
Yeah, absolutely. Because and I was going to say, like, a lot of that, all those suppressed emotions are living in the body and they're coming out in any way, shape, or form, whether it's like a sore back or a chronic illness. Like, there's a lot of things that really can just cause the body to be in a disease state. And I think if we learned from a young age, like I love how you said, use our emotions as tools, not something to be afraid of or suppressed, but something that we can use to power us forward, would be a really, really beautiful perspective shift, and something that would be so amazing to have learned at a young age, right? So thank you so much, Shaku. This was such an incredible conversation. Where can people find you?
I'm on all socials. I'm on Instagram, Adaku_Mbagwu, LinkedIn, Adaku Mbagwu, TikTok. Yeah, you can find me on all socials. But it's been such a pleasure having this conversation. It's always good to speak to a firstborn daughter who could relate to a lot of
Yes.
the things
Yes.
that we speak about. So thanks for having
Absolutely.
me.
Of course, thank you so much. I feel like I was like, "Are you in my head?" Like, half of the things you were saying, I was like, "You are, like, expressing in words things that I just am feeling all the time." So, it really was amazing, and I'll make sure that all of your information is linked below for everybody listening. And thank you guys for listening. Make sure you send this to your fellow eldest daughter in your life. I hope you guys have a wonderful week. I'll see you next time, and class dismissed.